Now, I think if boundaries aren't taught from a young age, if boundaries aren't taught within human beings, then what happens is you get lost in translation, and before you know it, you're in a complete train crash and it's a complete mess. Hello and welcome to CMB, Two Generations, One Mic, where we speak about all different things, some of the things you've told us to talk about yourselves. Anything you'd like to hear about, please put it in our comments, because we get on this mic and we literally just talk. We are not scripted, it's completely unfiltered, so what you get is raw content from us. Remember to like and subscribe for more content. Today, we are going to kick off our podcast talking about boundaries. It's a really, really big topic for me in my life, because I have really learned over the past years to try and lead with boundaries personally and try and teach my kids boundaries and my friends, family, everyone. I'm trying to always, if I'm ever coaching anybody in a situation, then I'm always coming back to that keyword of boundaries. So I'll start with you this time.
Oh, great.
What is your version of a boundary? What is a boundary to you? In a relationship, what is a boundary to you? I'm not talking about a relationship as in a woman and a man. I'm talking about in a relationship with a human being. What is your idea of a boundary?
I've only learned, I've got a confession.
Yeah.
I've only learned about boundaries after meeting you.
Okay.
Right. And the reason why I say that is because I didn't use the word boundaries, but I used the word limitations.
Yeah.
Right. Do you mean between me and my relationships, or me and my relationships with anybody?
Just relationships. What do you think a boundary is? I know it sounds like a basic question, but a lot of people don't really understand the word boundary. So what is a boundary? In a relationship of any kind, what is a boundary? A
boundary is the line that person is not allowed to cross. Because it then becomes you're overstepping my limits. So to give you an example of this, right, and this is the example that I give everybody, me being honest here, past relationships that I've had, I thought I did have boundaries, but I didn't have boundaries. And what I mean by that is, and I say this to all the people that I speak to, guys and girls, in your relationships with, whoever it is that you're with, if you swear at each other, then you've crossed a boundary, because then that becomes, whether it's your boundary or not your boundary, that becomes the norm and you're pushing the fence. If you touch each other or in a fit of rage, and I'm giving like a really extreme example, but because I didn't understand this before, and what I understand is if you do something like that, you're pushing the fence each time. And then what happens is once that relationship ends and then you go on to the next one, you take the baggage with you from the previous one, which was, that was normal then, so this must be normal for my future relationships. Whereas if you set that boundary from day one and you don't allow that person to do that, again, coming back to the swearing example, if you don't allow that person to swear at you and say, nope, I'm not going to tolerate that, then that doesn't carry on into any relationship that you have, whether that's with a spouse, whether that's with someone at work, whether that's with whatever it is. Doesn't answer your question.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you.
Okay.
What are your versions of what do you think a boundary is?
For me, I'd say that a boundary is where my limits are, where I value the respect for myself and what I will and won't accept in relationships with friends, boyfriends, partners, anyone in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I think as you grow up as well, you become a lot more familiar with what you do and don't like. I think there's always a narrative when you're growing up of respecting everyone around you, and especially respecting people who are above you, until you then encounter teachers who are not so nice to you as you grow up, or certain adults who are not so nice to you as you grow up. And I think you find the difference between being polite and respectful, but knowing who you do and don't want in your life and what you will and won't keep around you.
Okay. And yours?
I think it's very similar. A boundary to me is what I will and will not tolerate, whether that be, let me give an example of, like Sophia said, with teachers, and when I was in school and with my teachers, they crossed my boundaries many times, which is being condescending and talking down to me when we're realistically on the same level. Just because you're my teacher, that doesn't mean you are, I don't have to like word this, it doesn't mean you're above me in the way that you can speak down to me. And I was very argumentative because you crossed my boundary, and now you've annoyed me because you're being condescending and you're being patronizing.
Yeah, I think I taught you boundaries a little too well.
A little bit, yeah. But with like relationships, for example, I think with romantic relationships, I think boundaries are formed through experience. And obviously we're much younger than you guys, but we still have experience with romantic relationships, and that's definitely taught us boundaries. Now what we will and won't tolerate, because a year ago I'm sure it was very, very different, but I'm sure past exes, I can speak for myself, that relationship definitely taught me what I will and definitely will not accept with my future partner. And that has caused a lot of situationships to end with guys, because I'm kind of done with that. You're not respecting what I want in a relationship. So I'm kind of done with that. But then again, a lot of people don't understand boundaries, because then they're like, well, why are you just leaving because I did that? Because you're not respecting what I won't and will tolerate. So I think, yeah, that's what it means to me. But
And you?
So I think with boundaries, I think a lot of people in life get quite confused with what boundaries are, because they don't understand that and this is what I've kind of, I'm not saying I'm an expert in it, but I'm learning through talking to so many different people where relationships have failed or they've done well. And I'm talking about all types of, whether it's the teacher, whether it's the friend, whether it's the boyfriend, the husband, whatever it might be. Boundaries are something that if when you're a child, if you're taught boundaries, if you take a 10-year-old child, that's why I keep bringing Laura up today. She's like she should be here, shouldn't she? She needs royalties. If you take the 10-year-old child and you say to them, right, these are the boundaries that you have to accept when it comes to another adult human being. They shouldn't see you naked. They shouldn't ever touch you in your private parts. These are boundaries every parent teaches their child to begin with. Nobody's allowed to hit you. No one's, things like this. I'm telling you what your boundaries are. I'm informing you of what your boundaries are, but I need you to understand what your boundaries are yourself. It's really important. It's got to be ingrained in you. So I can say to you, these are your boundaries. You mustn't make that mistake, because these are your boundaries, and these aren't healthy. So you shouldn't be doing this because they've just sworn at you. That's your boundary. You shouldn't allow. That's not your boundary. That's my boundary. My boundary is you don't swear at me. If you swear at me, I'm not interested. Our argument's finished, because to me, it's just, I'm not willing to communicate on that level. If you shout at me, I'm not willing to communicate on that level. It's just not going to work for me. But those are my boundaries. Those are my inner boundaries. And I can't tell you what your boundaries are. I can't tell you. I can't tell that 10-year-old child what the boundaries are. You have to feel it, understand it, live and breathe it. And that becomes the silent language. It becomes a silent language, because you then get into a relationship and we're in a relationship and there's no swearing allowed in this relationship. The minute voices get raised, it's lower the voice, and the voice gets lowered immediately, because those were unspoken boundaries that happened very early on in our relationship that was just not going to happen. In our house, yes, voices get raised because we've got kids in the house, etc. But no one shouting at each other to get a point across is a boundary that's not acceptable. Now, I think if boundaries aren't taught from a young age, if boundaries aren't taught within human beings, then what happens is you get lost in translation, and before you know it, you're in a complete train crash, and it's a complete mess. But this really does come from parenting. It comes from when you're younger. It comes from when you're a kid. It comes from your mum and your dad. It comes from how you've been raised. And I really believe that. And actually, it's really interesting as we can talk now, because when I'm thinking about it, the dynamics of your childhood, my childhood, seen and not heard, etc. I come from that childhood. So do you, but in a different way because of culture.
Yeah.
Your childhood, which we'll explore a bit more, and yours, you've learnt different boundaries. You've almost learned, and you can correct me, but you've almost learned too many because you became the argumentative kid. No, you can't speak to me like that. No, no, no. And it becomes very much where I'm then having to say to Bella, okay, but that's your teacher. You need to step back a bit. You need to listen. But actually, I've taught her not to do that.
Yeah.
I've taught her by default, they can't talk to you that way. That person can't talk to you that way. And especially when they were much younger, I was like a bull in a china shop. You said, what to my child? What? And it would be me, pow. And I'd be like that mum that every teacher hated because you spoke badly to my child. I'll be like, who do you think you are? You've crossed my boundary. But actually, that wasn't the right way to go either, because I then gave my kids the green light to say to the teacher, basically, up yours. You can't talk to me like that because my mum said you can't talk to me like that. So it's almost
I'm pretty
the
sure
wrong.
I used that line. My mum said, "You're not allowed to speak to me like that."
But it's almost that has the adverse effect. Do you know what I mean? So there's
Yeah.
teaching boundaries in the right way, and then there's not teaching them in the right way. And I think, for you growing up,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah,
You know your boundaries that you've got?
yeah,
Where did you learn those boundaries? Because my boundaries,
Yeah.
which I was raised with, were completely different. So, you've taught her that a teacher is not allowed to speak to you like that. Like, you're saying to me, you and the teacher are on the same level. I'm not disagreeing with you, but despite that, they're in a position of authority, right? Okay, my childhood, okay? I went to the mosque when I was a kid, and the mosque teacher, pardon my French when I say this, used to beat the shit out of us. And we used to go home and tell our parents, and then our parents would say, no, he's your teacher, he's allowed to beat you. So that became our boundary, which is anybody who's in a position of authority is allowed to hit you.
how dangerous is that?
I know, but for us, or for me, I realize now that was incorrect. But when I was a kid, and all the kids in the class used to, I'm not saying it happens at every single mosque, but the mosque that I went to when I was growing up, I mean, the teacher there used to, fill up one of those plastic money bags, and when you annoyed him, he'd hit you around the head with it, or bamboo stick. You put your hand out, and he used to whip your hand. And it's
You're going to get comments in this, and they're going to go to the police are going to turn up at the mosque.
no, this was many years ago, and I'm not trying to incriminate anyone. But the point that I'm trying to make is, when I was growing up, we were always taught, because maybe it's to do with our parents and their upbringing, and the fact that they went to a school wherever they were, and the teachers were quite disciplinary on them. So I built a different set of boundaries to, for example, what you're saying. Where did you build your boundaries? How did you build that?
Easy. I built my boundaries because I felt very emotionally.
I mean, was that from your upbringing?
I built my boundaries, and especially the boundaries around my kids, because I felt really emotionally unprotected as a kid growing up.
Okay.
So because I felt so emotionally vulnerable and felt like I should be seen and not heard and not had a voice, and I probably shouted and misbehaved and did everything I could do to try and be heard,
Yeah.
I built up my boundaries growing up. I had to learn my boundaries in the hard way. I'm not willing to have that. But the difference is actually when I was younger, and I don't know if you remember bits and pieces of this, but when I was a bit younger, my boundaries would even be more, I'd be angry at certain things because I would be like the teacher situation. If I found out a teacher had spoken badly to my kids, it's like, sorry, did you think that was appropriate to speak to my child in that way? And I would be like straight away. So what it taught me is my boundaries were kind of grown through my kids. And I think that I also didn't have respect for my own boundaries within myself because the kid boundary overtook. But that, as I said, that wasn't the right way. That wasn't the right way, because then I taught my kids to go into school and basically tell the teachers to fuck off. And that's not the right way forward either, is it?
But
to be
sometimes
that way.
I wish that my parents would have done that, but that's a different...
I know, but I learned to be that way because my parents weren't like that with me.
Right.
I never felt like my parents had my back. through anything or everything. I never, to this day, have felt like my parents have my back. I've never felt like I can call my parents and they would be there and they would look after me and they would shelter me and they would make sure it was okay. So I had to put my own boundaries in place.
Got it.
And in putting my boundaries in place, I knew that things that would hurt me from my parents, I no longer was willing to deal with. So shouting, not willing to deal with it. Speak to me badly or speak down to me, not willing to deal with that anymore. Anything that I didn't like growing up from my parents, I then decided I'm not willing to do that anymore, because that doesn't make me feel good inside. That doesn't make Charlie feel good inside my own heart. And I'm a human. So then that became a boundary. So if I don't want to ever relive what my parents have done, let me now put my boundaries in place. And now it's fine, because my boundaries are in place. You know that you can't speak, you can't shout, you can't look at me the wrong way, you can't do anything.
You can't be around you.
You can't be around me. You must lay flowers on the floor for me, and we're all okay. I'm joking, but you know, it's that in play. I mean, how was it for you growing up? What was it with your parents? You come from a a family with an Asian father and, you know, and an English mum. So what was that like for you?
I think my boundaries were always a bit conflicted when I was younger, because I was always like petrified of misbehaving in primary school and secondary school. I was going to the mosque with my dad. Then as I got older, I realised that the same parental figure who was telling me to do this and that was then going out and going drinking. So it was like a very difficult, like it was hard to differentiate his morals in that sense. And then he worked away a lot as well. So a lot of the time I didn't have that like strong father figure for me saying, you're allowed, you let someone do this to you and you let someone do that to you, and you don't let someone speak to you that way. Or if someone does, then I'm going to be there to sort it out, because I felt like it was hard to build on that relationship that I had with him. And with my mum had a completely different upbringing to us. My mum had her first child at 17 and was homeless. So my mum sees what she's done for all of us now, and we're so grateful. But as soon as one of us feel like we've messed up or we want to talk to her about something, she takes it quite personally, because she sees how much she's given to us. She doesn't want us to ever feel how she felt in her position. So her boundaries are more about being grateful and being thankful for everything and being kind to everyone and like making everyone happy. That's where I get the like respectful side and like wanting to please all my teachers from. Whereas then that's then missing when I then see my parents argue, or my dad's away, or he's going against his religious morals. So I think in myself, mine came a lot from friendships, like so many friendships. I've always been friends with Bella, but we went through in and out of multiple groups of girls and peoples and boys, and you know, you do what you do when you're like a young silly teenager. You see some guys and you see those people grow up and what they grow up to be, and I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. I draw the line. I don't surround myself with people like that. I don't like how this friendship ended or how this friendship's making me feeling. Actually, it doesn't matter about everyone, how I make everyone else feel. If I'm unhappy, I know in myself I'm better off without that person in my life. And you just end up, as you get older, with more and more better people around you and the people that you do want to surround yourself with.
How has it been with how your relationship was with your dad? How's that affected your relationship with guys, like understanding your own, I keep saying the word boundaries. I know this podcast is about boundaries, but I am bringing it back to that. How's that affected you having your own boundaries if you didn't have the guidance that you feel you needed all the time?
Yeah, probably not the best, but I also think there's a lot of people who are in that situation who do grow up with like
loads
without that father figure now. And I think it's like almost it's now a thing like daddy issues, which is like a glamorized part of it now. But especially when I was younger a lot, I was so desperate to when someone was like, when I'd be arguing with an ex-partner, for them to not just be so angry and just like, I'd done something wrong and I'm scared that they're going to get up and leave. So then my boundaries get pushed back because I saw my parents argue, he go away. But because my mum never reacts back, my dad would always come back and everything would be fine. So I think it taught me to put my boundaries aside when I was like exploring where I sit in relationships, just to make sure like the fear of somebody leaving isn't there. But I think you grow out of it, and when you recognize the patterns of seeing that, oh wait, I can see these patterns in my parents' relationships, and how that made you feel when you were growing up in these situations, you just think, I want to change these, or how I perceive myself or how I perceive my parents, because I don't want my kids to ever feel like that. Like the day that I do have kids, I don't want that to be a household which kids grow up in and like felt like how I did. You obviously want your kids to be like, I'm the most important person in my life. I respect myself. I'm not gonna have somebody disrespect me. So yeah, I think as you grow older, you recognize the patterns, and it's less about like, I don't know, like breaking boundaries, but more like understanding who you are as a person and just what you do and don't tolerate.
Do you think you have boundaries in relationships? Like, do you think you understand your boundaries in a relationship with anybody, a girl or a guy? I'm talking about your friends with guy, anyone. Do you think you understand better now your relationship boundaries?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm getting there, but I think it's something.
I mean, you're young. Do you know what I mean? I'm not expecting you to understand everything.
I think you learn it like throughout your whole life though, because you come into my friendships are all so drastically different that like I wouldn't need the same boundaries for somebody, my friends who I go out with all the time, rather than someone who I know that I can always confide in. Like, yeah, I think it's just a part of growing up, which you have to understand about different people and yourself. And sometimes it's not even about the boundaries. Your boundaries are so different to somebody else's because of the way you've both been raised or the way you both see yourself or other people. You're just not going to get along and you're not going to be in each other's lives, and that's fine. You just draw the line. My thing is stop like wanting those people to still be in my life because of the boundaries that I had before.
Can you do that?
I think a lot better now.
Yeah.
Especially with people that I'm dating, but I find it a lot more difficult with friendships that I've had, because it's always like the what if, or like they'll change.
No, but I think you're a people pleaser.
Yeah.
I think you've always been a people pleaser. You've always been, I've known you since you were tiny, and I think you've always been that kid that was the people pleaser, and you don't want to have drama. And I think that you run away from drama.
Yeah.
Which is fine, and you're learning, and we're all learning. Do you know what I mean? It's totally fine to do that. But I think that as you're getting older, you're learning not to be a people pleaser so much. There's that whole thing, isn't there? Learn to say no.
Yeah.
Be saying no is like the hardest thing ever, is saying no to somebody or saying no to a situation. And I find that really hard. Like, I said no recently to I can't remember what it was. We had so much on our plate, so much. And for the first time in a long time, I said no to something. Someone asked me to do something, and I said, no, I'm really sorry, but I can't, or I can't come and help you. And I felt really guilty. I don't remember what it was now. I felt really guilty because I know that person needs me to go and do something for them, but I need me, and I've got a family at home that need me, and there's only so much I can do at this given moment in time. And that made me really look at my own boundary of, okay, Charlie, now you need to say no.
Yeah.
And I think that is the hardest boundary that we all learn, is when do you say no? Because so many people don't know when to say no at all. I mean, do you think you've got your, because I've seen you have, your relationships, and it's just hard. It's really hard for a parent to see your baby, having relationship and being hurt and being, it's really tough, because you think, I'm going to make you like a iron rod so that nothing can hurt you, nothing can penetrate, nothing can get through to you emotionally. But ultimately, you have to live your life. You have to go through that hurt to understand how to deal with that hurt better the next time, and things like that. You have to learn it. It's not something that I can wrap that up in a present for you and it's okay. It's something you have to learn, and you got to see your child cry. And as a parent, that's really super tough. It's really tough, because you teach them the lessons you think you can teach, but you can't. Do you think you've, I mean, you're like the boundary queen at school, but do you think you've come into boundaries with your relationships better?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's pros and there's cons, because the boundary of how I will and won't tolerate being spoken to, I've had that boundary from a young age because you've enforced that boundary. But that boundary has definitely been utilized in my romantic relationships too, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because I won't tolerate being spoken badly to, or if you swear at me, I'm not going to listen to you. If you raise your voice to me, I'm not going to listen to you. Or if I feel like you disrespect me during an argument, I'm not going to listen to you. But it's also made me become a little bit too much of a princess sometimes, where I think that I am on the pedestal, which I'm not. And I'm still harnessing how to stop being so much of a princess. But I think that's also come from feeling like I've been on a pedestal with you because we're so close. So I always now, I can't believe I'm like admitting this, but I feel like I'm on like a pedestal with myself, which is good. I hold myself highly and I respect myself. But it also makes me think about previous relationships or things that are about to be a relationship, and I'm like, oh, I actually went wrong there. But in that moment, I thought I was right. But I actually went wrong there, and then I think my boundary got a bit cloudy because I thought I had the upper hand, but not really. I didn't. But from my past relationship, that taught me a lot because I was so young. I didn't really have any boundaries in place, but that taught me a lot of what I will and will not tolerate, which is good because it helps filter out the bad apples now. But I think it's also given me very high standards, which is a good thing and also a bad thing, because some things what I should tolerate, I just don't.
I actually think you're wrong in something. I think you're really wrong in the pedestal thing, because I don't think there's any harm in putting yourself on a pedestal, actually. I think that's totally fine. I think it's totally fine to love yourself. And I think if there's a bit more of the loving yourself from humans, from people, then I think that perhaps relationships will get off to a better start. I think that it's not a lot of people they get into relationships and in the beginning you're in that honeymoon period, and during that honeymoon period everything gets blurred, boundaries get blurred, everything's blurred. I'm trying to please everybody, and you might take yourself down off your pedestal for a second to please that other person. But actually, no, we should all put ourselves on the pedestal that we deserve to be on, because if you can't love yourself and have your boundaries in play and know that you're secure in that place, then how do you expect other people to respect you and love you and put you where you deserve to be? I think that is, I put you on a pedestal. I put you on a pedestal. I put you on a pedestal. I put you on the pedestals you deserve to be on. And I respect you. I respect you. You're my daughter. You're our best friend. I respect you. I have untold respect. So therefore, you're up on a huge pedestal in my eyes because I have respect for you. So if you feel that you perhaps need to now remove yourself from a pedestal because of someone else, no. Your big boundaries just been crushed to the floor. You can't remove yourself from a pedestal. You need to be up on your pedestal. Love yourself. And if you can't, you need to learn to love yourself up on there, because you know something? On that pedestal, there's only room for one. So there's only room for that one person on that pedestal. You can't put two people up there. You'll fall. So once you've learned to love yourself on the pedestal, then the other person can come and stand next to you on their pedestal. And they can, but if you're down on the, and you're still trying to figure yourself out on the floor, trying to figure out your boundaries and figure out where you are in life, when you're up on your pedestal and you love yourself and you have your boundaries in play, then we'll talk about our relationship, because now you're on my level. But until you get to my level, we can't talk about our relationship because you're not quite there yet. You're still trying to find yourself. And that's okay, because we've all been there trying to find ourselves. And sometimes we fall down and we have good friends that say, up you go again, find yourself again, you're fine. But I do think that we all need to recognize that we all have a pedestal in this world, and we need to be on that pedestal and live our boundaries and understand from our heart why we deserve to be on there. Whether you've had conflicting parents, whether you've had a mum that's given you too much of kicking other people down and saying no, whether you've had an upbringing of parents that are, haven't shown you even where your pedestal is in the world, you've found it now. You found your pedestal. And sometimes even you or me or whoever, we fall off of it and you get reminded why you need to be back up on your pedestal. But I think that's where your boundaries start from, actually. That's why I said to you, you're wrong there, in my opinion. Because I think that you should never get down off your pedestal for anybody. Otherwise, that's when you crush your boundaries, and then you let somebody, while they're trying to find themselves and trying to find their emotion, you get caught up in the crossfire of them trying to find their emotion and trying to figure out who they are. And it's like the whole thing, look in the mirror and find yourself. This is what I mean about the narcissism, though. If you are on a pedestal and if you put yourself in that place, and that's not an easy thing to do, by the way, putting yourself on a pedestal and being so, I fall off that pedestal regularly and then I put myself back on again, because to be that secure within yourself in the world we live in previous podcasts that we've done about social media, to constantly keep yourself on a pedestal, it's like the pedestal balancing on a tiny stone. Yeah. It's wobbling, you know what I mean? It's like being on a balance board. It's not easy to stay on there. That's some core stability. It's really not easy to stay on top of the pedestal. But I think that once you manage to master that and you manage to be on top of that play, then you can't let people like narcissists get through to you, or anybody with any social disetiquette, if that's even a word.
No, but I know what you mean.
It's a word, by the way. But you can't let them penetrate you. So I get what you mean about narcissists worm their way in, and anybody else with any form of manipulating energy. People have said to me in the past, you manipulate. Yeah, I am a manipulator. 1,000,000%. I, Charlie, am a manipulator. 100%. I've said it to the camera. I'm a manipulator. I manipulate, but I don't manipulate for bad things. I manipulate for good. If I feel that something's going in the wrong direction, I might just kind of, just steer you around that corner.
Yeah, but we all do that.
But being manipulative is not always bad, though. People can throw at people, you're manipulative, but it's not a bad thing to be manipulative. We're talking about influencers previously. They are manipulative. That's manipulation in its highest form, is being influential. So actually, it's not bad to be somebody that manipulates other people if you're manipulating for a good purpose, right? But when somebody has narcissistic behavior or behavioral traits that are not favorable, then if we learn to put ourselves on that pedestal and keep self-teaching and teaching the ones that we love and teaching each other and guiding, we always need to be guided. I speak to my best friend every single morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, every single morning. We speak a lot. I'm constantly talking, and it's because I also need guiding all the time. But if you're constantly looking at putting yourself on that pedestal and keeping your boundaries in play and everything intact, then you'll be the best version of yourself you can be for other people and for yourself. And that narcissist who really is out of control, if you look at it, if you look at the traits, they're out of control of their own emotions, and they try and manipulate you in a bad way to feed their emotions that they can't control themselves. Nobody can penetrate you. And you've spoken about you've had a bad relationship where this person could manipulate through to you. But sorry to say this, but because you've had a mum and a dad who had conflicting relationships growing up, and you've had to see a mum that was a yes person and a dad that wasn't really there and didn't really show you boundaries, you've then had to find them yourself.
Yeah.
And you found it yourself through being in a shitty relationship. And now you know what your boundaries are. I recognize that in you because I also had the same thing. My parents didn't teach me boundaries. I wasn't even allowed boundaries. But I had to learn them myself through going through bad relationships and bad situations to now know exactly what I do want in a relationship and what I won't tolerate as negative things with my friends, with my relationship, with anything. I won't tolerate anything, that are out of my boundaries, because I know what I can give back. I know what I can give to somebody. So then I don't believe a narcissist can get through to you if you are smart enough to outsmart them by learning the lessons or by being taught by somebody or having previous relationships that didn't work out and you know what you don't want, you learn how to push away that bad energy, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
since I had Raphael, before I had him, and maybe you're the same now that you've got a brother, but you look at this little boy and you think, all the shit that can come your way just because you got a penis is unbelievable. And, you know, the misogynist, the narcissist,
Toxic
the
masculinity.
toxic, this one, you're aggressive, all these different things that can get thrown. You've got a brother. They can get thrown at boys and men. And it's really quite unfair because women overuse their power as a woman and throw all of these labels on men because they are not secure within themselves as women.
Yeah.
And they throw these labels on men that, and you're right, like just throwing labels out about people is just so bad. And more now, I'm so sensitive to it because I have a son.
Yeah.
And I look at him and I think, God forbid someone threw these things at my precious boy when he's older. And, you know, how would he defend himself in that? So I can teach him all the boundaries in the world. But is that then going to turn around and make him look like, well, he's so confident that he's going to get called all these names instead and then not want to live up to these names because he thinks, well, I'm just confident in myself because my parents and my siblings have taught me to be confident. But now I'm being called a misogynist. Now I'm being called a narcissist. Now I'm being called all these names. Is that going to get me into trouble? Maybe I shouldn't be how I've been taught to be because now I'm too strong. And I do think that men they really hold the short end of the straw when it comes to the name calling. So it's almost like you got to really teach the guys more about boundaries than you do the girls because the guys can really be ripped apart. And I hate seeing it. I hate seeing how men can get ripped apart for really doing nothing. Yes, you get your percentage that do a lot of bad things. It's the same as you get a percentage of women that do really bad things. Yeah. And that can be, like you said, even more dangerous because the women do it in secret and they smile and they cry and they get away with it. Whereas the men just get blamed straight away. And it's quite a scary place to kind of explore.
Can I just add something to this? And the reason why I'm adding this is because it's so relevant to right now. You know, we had a conversation last week about this boy in the Middle East, I think it's Dubai at the moment, that's just been arrested. Yeah. And the conversation that we had was, look, you know, whatever the Dubai government decide to do and what have you, that's their choice. And I'm not going to say anything to that. However, we've got a son now and we have to teach him boundaries with regards to how to behave with the opposite sex in terms of girls, because this poor innocent boy out there at the moment, how old is he now? 18, who got with this girl and it was clearly consensual, right? Unless it was.
And for UK, it was legal, right?
Yeah.
And now he's having to pay the consequences and pay the price for it.
He's been sentenced to a year in Dubai prison.
Right. Well, there you go. And we were talking about how the fact that, you know, it's good that you brought this up because now you see it from your son's perspective and what we have to teach him and how to behave around people and boundaries and how to say no to a girl. For a guy to say no to a girl, you have to be very careful with this. And I don't know, I just think we live in a world at the moment where, you know, boundaries, yes, women should have boundaries because there are guys out there that are not very nice. I'm going to say that myself, but there are also women that are not very nice. And there's an example of that. So guys just as much have to be taught boundaries.
But it's like what you said when you asked earlier, like, oh, why was I being called a narcissist? Those labels can be so detrimental because, like, yeah, you came out of that and recognized and you're now in like a loving relationship. But a lot of people can internalize those labels and they're like, oh, well, maybe, like you said earlier, well, maybe I am just a narcissist. Maybe I am just a horrible person. And it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You then turn into a horrible person or you're so like, woe is me. And you carry that into your next relationships. And unless you like so what, like, all of it goes to, at the end of the day, you've got to be so secure in yourself that you can't be, like, infiltrated by people's negative words. Otherwise, you are likely to just become the type of person that they're telling you that you are. And, like, if you're beat and beat and beat down and called this and that, like, for so long in such, like, a intense relationship, it's hard not to, like, carry that baggage with you, when really you should just be able to know in yourself, like, somebody that I love isn't going to make me feel like that, or, like you say, like, put you in a position like that boy's now in Dubai prison. It's just, yeah,
I think the
scary.
other thing as well is, adding on to that is, and I only realize this now as I'm getting older, right? And because I've learned this from my own relationship now, you know, boundaries, the topic that we're discussing and talking about, it has to be taught to your kids.
Yeah.
It has to be taught from parents, right? And the kids need to be able to see that within their parents, and they need to have an example of it, right? So I'll give an example. Bella, you witness us arguing all the time. I know you hear us arguing all the time.
All the time.
Not all the time, but you hear us arguing now and again, right? Listen, we live in a household, we don't agree on everything all the time, but the manner in which we argue with each other and how we squash our arguments, we do that just as much. So you've been witness to that. The boundaries that you need to have in place, that you teach your kids as they're growing up, it comes from the household, and I think it also comes from your friends too, right? The people that you're around. Those are the two most...
Yeah, but some people are in households that when they argue, it's screaming and shouting. We never shout at each other in an argument at home. Never. Voices might get raised a little bit, but there's never shouting across the house. Some people, they're grown up in that.
I know that, and I've witnessed that myself. I've witnessed people that I've known in my personal life and my past relationships where they were used to seeing their parents screaming and shouting at each other in front of the kids. And not just that, furthermore, screaming and shouting at each other in public and in front of other people and getting them involved. So now
God forbid.
Right. So now when these people now, can you imagine this person's boundary? So now when they're having an argument, there's no limitations to their argument. They will argue in front of you. They'll argue in front of the neighbor. Because I never saw that in my own upbringing, I found that so abnormal, and I found that so cringeworthy and embarrassing that I couldn't just understand why people behave like that. But obviously I understand it now, but for a very long time I didn't get that. So I think it does start from the household, it does start from home, and it starts from your parents, and how, unless you're someone like you, of course, where at some point you just think, no, I'm not going to put up with that, and this is just how I want my life to play out. Whereas someone like myself, with my upbringing, it was slightly different with what I saw.
Yeah,
I realized that
I don't think you always learn from your home though, right? About boundaries. Like, I don't think you learn that at home always. I think that sometimes there are a lot of people that have really, I mean, some of the kids that used to be at your school, even with your parents, I understand your parents look different. They may have argued there, but you still have got those two parents that are still at home now together. They're still in a relationship. You still saw them get through. Do you know what I mean? It's still, you still got that 2.4 family, or not, you know, 2 point however many, but you still got that family. but some of the kids in your school, I mean, I remember having to walk one of your friends home at like 12 o'clock at night or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm just going to go home now. This little tiny thing. She was like, what, not 10, or, you know, you start at 11. Like 11, going to go and walk like to up Heading Court from Westpole by herself in the middle of the night. And I'd be like, you're bloody well not. I'll walk you. But then she had no boundaries. Like, some of those kids at East Barnet had zero boundaries at school.
Yeah.
At home, sorry. No boundaries. And it's...
Yeah. I think parents as well, though, like, that type of parenting comes from, oh, I used to be able to go out and play on the street till whatever time and come in. We don't live in a world like that anymore.
You're right.
Those boundaries are not there. There's now social media. There's now so much more dangerous people having access to do dangerous things that you can't just depend on leaving your front door unlocked and let your kid run around in the street, because you're not safe. Like, you need to snap out of that and then reinforce those boundaries into your kid before somebody ends up getting hurt.
Yeah.
It's
That's actually a really
scary.
true. This one's throwing us today.
I know. Do you want to?
I don't understand.
Do you want to do the podcast next week?
week. Sit here next
Yeah.
week. But that's really true. There's so many parents that like, back in my day, I could just go and knock down Ginger, and then now it's like you go knock on someone's door, you don't know whose door you're knocking on.
Yeah.
Do you remember we went trick or treating that time, and we went, where were we? I think we were in Barnet or somewhere. And do you remember that house that opened the door, the trick or treaters and the guy, and he's wearing that long leather jacket? Do you remember? They were really creepy looking, and he opened up the door, and I thought, no, you're waiting for children. This is not.
I do not remember.
You're not a trick or treat. This is not trick or treating door. Like, you're waiting for children. You're a predator, and he really felt like a child predator. And I just thought, no, this is, we think we live in this safe world, but you don't. No. And then these kids are having just to learn how to be as they get older, and then hopefully you have good friends if you haven't learnt the boundaries at home. But if you haven't, then you're stuck, aren't you? And you're in a situation where the boundaries haven't been put into play. And what do you do?
Figure it out for yourself.
You've got to figure it out. But you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's how you got to get through this world. It's how you get through life. You can't rely on everyone. You can't rely on everything. And you have to just try and figure out right from wrong. Right. Thank you very much once again. Thank you very much. If you would like to hear any more content from us, please like and subscribe. Add any comments below, and we look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.